Sports Pod, where we'll be discussing the Bengals' first round draft prospects, along with USA Today's and the betting odds predictions for the Reds' upcoming season. And then we'll take a look at Bubble Watch for the NCAA tournament. Best time of year, March Madness. All right, let's get into it. We'll talk about the Bengals draft prospects now. So starting off, I think we're gonna talk about which position group we think is of biggest need. So I personally think edge is something we have to address in the first round. Everyone's saying like D tackle, guard, but I just feel like with all of this free agency drama looming in the air, whether we're gonna get Trey Hendrickson back, it is 100% the biggest need on our team. And I feel like a guy like James Pierce Jr., who had back-to-back seasons of 7.5 sacks, would be that guy. There are a little bit of character concerns, but hopefully, once they get an interview with him, I think he would be a really good prospect for us to look at in the first round. Which position group do you think the Bengals should address?
I personally think it's got to be on the defensive side. If you're for me, you can argue wide receiver with the T Higgins thing up in the air if we trade him or we don't sign him after the tag, but basically we're gonna have him for this season, so I think you got to focus on defense. Edge would be a good place to start. You could also argue linebacker because of losing Jermaine Pratt and maybe even a defensive back. Personally, I like Malachi Starks, safety out of Georgia. Really good player in the defensive backfield. Ball hawk, great skills in the air to get an interception. There's a 50-50 ball. Yeah, and he tackles really well too. Hard hitter, comes down the field, and typically defensive players out of Georgia have been panning out so far. So it'd be a pretty safe bet. And if he falls to you at 17, I think you got to take him.
I think that's a great pick as well. You trade away Geno Stone, you input him right there in starting lineup along with Jordan Battle, and I think that makes up for. I mean, he's a very speedy safety, so you won't be lacking in that area. Well, Jordan Battle's more of like a consistent tackler, and as well as Malachi Starks is as well, but make it a young safety room that can learn from a great defensive coordinator and Al Golden, who knows how to develop college guys. So I think this is a great fit. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles recipe for success is basically draft Georgia players on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that will work out well for the Bengals if they end up going that way. And then we'll discuss a few more of the prospects and then we'll rank them. I think this guy is a stud. A lot of people are saying defensive tackle, but we literally just drafted two in our previous draft in 2024. So I think we've got I think this guy's really good. I mean, he had 6.5 sacks and 26 solo tackles on the year at Ole Miss. So he's a very critical player for them, Walter Nolan. Um, and then the last prospect was Tyler Booker. He's a guard out of Alabama, and he didn't allow a sack all season. So it would be really nice with cutting Alex Kappa to get another, a better guard, especially because he led. I mean, he had the triple crown and sacks allowed for a guard, I believe pressures and like um, some other stat, but it wasn't good. And if you get Tyler Booker, I think that helps with the offensive line and the guards. So we'll move on to our next topic. I I mean, buy or sell, the Reds are third in the NL Central this year. Tied for ninth in the NL, which means they would miss the playoffs. USA Today's got the Dodgers, Phillies, Cubs, Braves, Mets, Diamondbacks, and Padres. making the playoffs, and then the Brewers and Reds and Giants being left out on the outside. So 81 and 81, I feel like that might be a little disrespectful. I think this team is gonna at least be 3 to 4 games above 500, maybe even more. Um, Considering everything went wrong for you last season. So, I mean, what's your take on this?
Uh, I personally, I know there's Cincinnati sports doesn't typically give us much to believe in, but I'm gonna choose to put some belief in this Cincinnati Reds squad. If you take a look at some of the numbers during spring training, Matt McLain's hitting 412, Ellie De La Cruz is hitting 538. Numbers like that are very encouraging. I know it's spring training; it's kind of like preseason for football, or I don't know, like practice games for basketball. You don't want to put too much into it, but it's hard to ignore what I'm seeing here. Ellie De La Cruz has already hit 3 home runs. Obviously, he was one of the players we mentioned as could be a really key piece for this team this year. And at plus 325, I'd be willing to play some good money on that for the Reds. That's good value there. And what I'm seeing in spring training, I'm going to choose to believe it translates to the regular season.
Honestly, I don't think this is one of the better divisions in baseball. It all really comes down to I think they're placing too much faith in the Cubs this season. I was shocked with USA Today's production model of not having the Brewers win the division. I'd either put it up in the air for the Cubs or the Reds to come out with that second in the division spot and contend for a wild card. But I think I honestly, yeah, put money down on that. That's good value. And another thing to look at within the division this year is how bad the Cardinals will be. If you're able to get, I believe you play the Cardinals about 12 times. I think it's for you have 4 series, or maybe it's either, I think there might be 2 4-game series within your division. So I think it might be 14. But if you value the Cardinals as a team that's going to play well this year, then maybe you hedge the Reds and you're more confident than the Cubs. Or, I mean, if you don't think the Cardinals are going to play as well, I mean, if you can beat up on the Cardinals and the Cubs and then, split or even do better than that against the Cubs and Brewers, you're looking at a really good baseball team. So,
Yeah, I would have to agree. And like you mentioned, the pitching staff is going to be a key part as well. I think so far in spring training, they're doing all right. Obviously, can do better, could do worse. So I think overall, it's a good spot to be. Tim, I don't know about. I know me personally, I don't watch a ton of spring training. I don't put a lot into it. What are your thoughts on that? Do you watch any spring training baseball or no?
I basically just stay up to date with what the guys are doing. I basically box score watch,
Hmm.
and I see. I mean, Matt McLean's numbers jumping off the stat sheet as well as Ellie's, and then a lot of other guys. A lot of role players have been playing well. I think Fraley had a home run a couple of games ago. So if you put stock into the preseason essentially. I think this team is in for a really good hot start, and that's something that's very critical in baseball. We talk about it with the Bengals all the time that they seemingly cannot start hot. But if the Reds are able to get off to a hot start this year, I think that fuels a team that is confident and believes that they can beat just about anyone that they um, are put up against them. I mean, in the previous years, we've beaten the big time teams like the Dodgers, the Yankees, those big markets. I think this team really thrives on the big stage. Just got to make sure that they don't go throughout slumps in the season that hinder their playoff chances. So, and then a few of the key players that need to be good for the Reds this year. Matt McLean hit 290 his rookie year with 50 RBIs and 23 doubles. And then we got Ellie. Obviously, was seventh in the rookie of the year his rookie year, and then he was an all-star and eighth in MVP voting in 2024. The cover of MLB The Show, I think he's got a good shot at uh, looking for MVP this year in the NL if Shohei Ohtani doesn't go crazy this year. It's always it's always tough when you can have a guy that does both pitch and hit at a very elite level. So, and then Jake Fraley, I think he's going to be a key piece. He was like Mr. Consistent last year, and he had a lot of outstanding circumstances with his son last year. Was diagnosed with a tough disease, and it was just really tough for him. But he still hit really well at 277, very consistent with 19 doubles and 97 hits. So if he can continue to improve like he has every year, um, I believe first year um, as a rookie, he hit 259 and then 256, slight uh, drop off, and then up back up to 277. So if he can have a good year, I think we're in for a really good Red season. And then the pitchers, the key pitchers, Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Andrew Abbott, Alexis Diaz, and then another one to look at is Nick Martinez. If this if they can play the way I expect them to play, this can be one of the best starting rotations in the league. I don't know what your perspective on the pitching staff this year is, Jack, but
I mean, definitely some good names on here. I think it's all about consistency. And Hunter Green up there, all-star caliber type pitcher, but sometimes he has a game or two where he's kind of getting picked off and he's throwing a ton of pitches, and he's only going out for 3, 4 innings. So you got to be able to prolong, get 6, 7 innings out of your starting guys, and let the bullpen come in and do their work. Obviously, the bullpen hasn't been great or reliable recently for the Reds, but obviously Lodolo, Abbott, Diaz, like all these guys, I think they're very capable of being good names and putting up good numbers. And combine that with what we expect to be a pretty good offense with some of the base running we've seen in spring training, even. We saw a double steal the other night, first down to second, allowed a runner from third to come home, tie the game against the Brewers. That I did see as part of spring training. But I think overall, I think the staff has everything organized, and I think they're where they want to be right now.
agreed. I mean, if you look at what Nick Lodolo and Andrew Abbott have done since their rookie year, I feel like they have, you know, been on a downward trajectory, whereas Hunter Green has been going upward ever since his rookie year. These guys need to turn it around and have a really good year this year because we're placing a lot of trust in them to get the job done and go out and pitch 5 to 6 scoreless innings or one run baseball. So you give yourself a really good chance to win when you do that, especially when you have a guy like Alexis Diaz closing it out if he comes back to 2023 form. And I think we're in good shape if this starting rotation can be everything we expect it to be. So, and then next week, we'll talk a little bit more about the Big East and Big 12 tournaments. But right now, I think we'll focus on the bubble watch. Few
Yeah,
teams to look for. I mean, I think in Joe Lenardi and Mike DeCourcy's first four out, they've got, I believe, uh, Boise State, Xavier, Wake Forest in there, and North Carolina, possibly something like that. I might have
yeah.
one of them.
Yeah, I'm looking at Joe Lenardi's right now. He's got last four in Ohio State, Arkansas, Nebraska, and Boise State. He just updated this morning. First four out, he has Oklahoma, Xavier, North Carolina, and Texas. So some interesting teams here. Baylor, San Diego State, Georgia, and Indiana are the last four byes as of right now, which means they're safely in the field, not playing in Dayton in that first four. The next four out, he has SMU, Cincinnati, Villanova, and Wake Forest. Wake Forest, who just lost to Duke the other night. But it's this bubble historically is not very good. Not a ton of great teams in here. Ohio State is 16 and 13. They've got good computer numbers, but a ton of losses in here. Like Cincinnati's 17 and 12, and they're still in the mix. Xavier's a team that's hot right now. They're kind of on a run. They're in good position. North Carolina has a big opportunity against Duke this weekend if they can win and get in. Um, so there's just a lot, especially the SEC with how many teams they have and how many teams they have on the bubble. It's been a really, really interesting year, and you could pick any of these teams here and list a solid case, and you could lay out a path for them to make the tournament, and you could reasonably see it happen.
I feel like if there's any year for the Big East to have five teams in the tournament, I feel like it's this year. It's just very solid conference. It's not the best. Obviously, the SEC jumps off the paper with probably double-digit tournament teams this year. I mean, the ACC is having a bad year. They believe the only three teams that, I mean, and then they have one that's contending for a spot. They've got Duke, Clemson, as well as Louisville, and then North Carolina's on the bubble, and then as well as Wake Forest. I know Wake Forest is in the SEC, right?
Wig is in the ACC.
Yeah, ACC. Well, they're contending as well, but it's kind of down here for the ACC as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how many teams from each conference are able to, you know, get into the tournament.
Yeah, I agree. And they're like every single game down the stretch is going to matter. Obviously, Tuesday here, ton of games. Ohio State against Nebraska tonight should be a really interesting one. That is a bubble game. Both teams in that last four in position. Arkansas plays Vanderbilt, so Arkansas, if they can win there, that'd be big. Oklahoma hosts Missouri. That'd be a big win for Oklahoma. Um, so just down the stretch, you got to win, and at this point, one loss is most likely going to eliminate you. So it's pretty much got to treat it as basically as a tournament from here on out, especially with conference tournaments coming up. As you mentioned, we'll talk about those next week, I think.
I have a question for you. I mean, I think with these tournament bubble teams, I feel like they might be putting a little too much value in the computer analytics, and they're not just looking at wins and losses. Although quad one is a very important stat. Uh, Xavier 1-9 in quad nine, Cincinnati 1-10 in quad one. Both horrible when it comes to quad one wins, but you also have to look at Ohio State has only won 16 games and they have hit them in the last four in. I think if you look at a different at it a little bit differently and look at the teams who are hot right now and have more wins, I feel like those teams are more deserving than the teams who have good computer numbers, in my opinion.
I agree, Tim. I think that's a common gripe that some people might have with the selection committee and their process. When do wins and losses actually matter? Nebraska 17 and 12, Cincinnati 17 and 12. North Carolina was 14 and 11 at one point. And granted, they've ripped off some wins then, but all these teams with double-digit losses. Indiana 18 and 11. Uh, my Hoosiers. So like I'm happy they're considered in the field right now, but you got to take into account wins and losses. And if you truthfully, to be honest, I think part of the reason that wins and losses aren't as highly considered as maybe fans may want them to be is because Ohio State, Indiana, they're in the Big Ten, or Arkansas, Oklahoma, they're in the SEC. I think some of it honestly just comes down to conference bias. And because you so supposedly have a tougher schedule, you're allowed to take more losses, and that leaves out some of the like mid-major teams that would have a chance to be in, but they're not going to because you see these teams with 10, 11, 12 losses be safely in.
I remember Xavier. They played a really tough non-con. I think it was either last year or the year before that, and they were considered for the tournament, and they had like 16 wins. I think they had 16 wins where at this point in the season where they have 19 wins and 10 losses, I just feel like a team that has more wins is more deserving in my opinion. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what these teams from the A10, well, the A10 is probably only going to get one. What VCU will do, the WCC with like Boise State and these smaller conferences, well as St. Mary's, and then obviously Gonzaga is going to be in there. But like what these type teams will do in the tournament.
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously, we know UCLA, the COVID year, they went from first four to Final Four, getting all the way to the Final Four there against Gonzaga. We know Jalen Suggs hit that big 3-point shot. But for me, there's one team I'm going to point out from the Mountain West. They should be in no matter what. I think they're going to win the Mountain West tournament, so I believe they'll get in either way. Um, that's New Mexico. They're slated on the 8-9 line right now. Joe Lunardi has them as a 9 seed. Really, really good point guard, and Donovan Dent averages just under 20 points a game, about 5 assists, 5 rebounds. Phenomenal guard. Gets the ball up and down the floor, has good pace. And this is New Mexico team coached by Richard Pitino, son of Rick Pitino. And I think New Mexico is a sneaky team that if you're on the one line and you got to play them in the second round, I would watch out. And St. John's as well in the Big East. I think they're at 6 right now in the country AP poll. They'll probably be a 2 or a 3 seed. I don't think that's a team you want to see in the Sweet 16.
Uh, I agree. Any coach Patino, if they have the last name Patino, I don't want to play him. They are probably a pretty good basketball team when you have the pedigree of coaching those teams. Um, I would say one of my teams that I think is sort of shocking that they haven't moved up in the rankings and they've just been sitting there at 8. Michigan State and Tom Izzo's Spartans team is looking really good. They're at the top of the Big Ten. They had a couple down years before this year, but any team coached by Tom Izzo, I trust in the March Madness. Not one of those teams that you see go out early much. Um, they are poised to make a deep run. All they have been doing is winning, and they've just been staying right where they're at. Obviously, they value them, but because they'll probably end up being a 2 or a 3 seed. But it's going to be interesting down the stretch in these last 2 games. I don't know the game they have before Michigan, but looks like they are poised to make a deep run. And then one of my sleepers probably in the tournament. I feel like anytime um, you have a 7 footer, I know they just got crushed by Xavier, but I like Creighton. I also like Marquette. Um, but anytime you have a 7 footer on the floor, they get past your perimeter defense, and you have a shot blocker who's won a national defensive player of the year multiple times in his career. They have Ryan Kalkbrenner. They've got other solid players like Stephen Ashworth. Um, so I feel like they are a team that I've always liked to pick to go deep in the tournament, as well as Marquette with Cam Jones, one of the best scorers in the country, poised to be a lottery pick. So that might be a little bit of my Big East bias, but I've watched these teams all year, and I think they're really good teams. So
Yeah. Tim, if I can just pose a quick question for you, what would you what do you think is the most likely scenario? One of Cincinnati and Xavier get in, both get in, or neither of them get in? I have an answer, but I'm curious as to what you think right now.
I would probably say it's out of the 2 teams, Cincinnati and Xavier, I'd probably have to go with Xavier, just purely based off how hot they are right now. They were sitting at 14-10, and they've ripped off 5 straight wins. Granted, not very good opponents, but they just came off a 20-point win, 22-point win versus Creighton. And then Cincinnati, they would have to make a really deep run or win. Um, so I think it's probably one right now or none. One or none for sure.
Yeah. And personally, I think Xavier's going to get there right now, whether that's last four in or like just getting into the field, not even having to play in Dayton. I think they're going to get in. As you mentioned, they're hot right now. I saw them play Cincinnati in the crosstown shootout. That was a really good game. Very impressed with Ryan Conwell and his game. Love the way he plays basketball. On the Cincinnati side, I think they got to win 4 games minimum. 2 games the rest of the season and 2 games in the Big 12 tournament. I think 3 gets them in. But if they win 4, so they win out, they win 2 games, and then win 2 games in the Big 12 tournament, it's enough. Maybe other teams around them lose. They sneak into the first 4. Imagine we get Cincinnati and Xavier in a first 4 game in Dayton. How electric would that be?
That would be pretty awesome.
I mean, it would be like that, especially Dayton, short drive away. I mean, I
I
might not
think
even go to the
everyone's
game.
going up for that. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be pretty awesome.
Hmm.
Crosstown shootout, just do it again, same year. I'd love that. Tournament atmosphere,
Hmm.
2 teams that are literally 2 miles away. I think that would make for some good basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. So the selection committee, you have your job.
Yeah.
You know what to do.
I mean, I was looking at an Instagram post of the most heated rivalries in college basketball, and we obviously got North Carolina, Duke. You got what are some other ones?
Indiana, Purdue.
Indiana, Purdue. Um, obviously, Michigan, Michigan State, uh, Auburn, Alabama.
Yep.
But right, I feel like a lot of people don't understand the gravity of what it's like to be a Musketeers fan or a Bearcats fan. And uh, it's not that any of the teams are like unlikable. The players on the teams, I mean, I think you can admit as a Bearcat fan, Ryan Conwell's a fun player to
Yeah,
watch.
I just said that.
Yeah,
He was cooking in that second half in the crosstown shootout.
yeah,
They almost beat us.
yeah. And I mean, I love watching Jizzle James, the 2 guards, Day Day Thomas. I love the names, love the way they're able to score the ball. Uh, and Luke Kocius, he's been down. He's also
Yeah.
got a cool name, but if he can just, just start scoring more points, I think they could make a run.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's right there for both teams, really.
all right. Well, I think we're gonna finish up the pod right here. It was nice talking to you guys about the Bengals draft selection in the first round, the Reds projection in the NL Central, as well as Bubble Watch. We'll see you next week to discuss Big East prediction for the tournaments and as well as the Big 12. Uh, should be good basketball coming up. It's March. All right. We'll see you next time on
Oh.
Cincy Sports Pod.